Hi, so in this very last class about breaking out of the victimization loop, realize we've been very careful to make sure you respect yourself, that you learn how to self-soothe, that you look at all these tools that you have to be able to help you, that you also look deeper into why you might be very stuck in a victim identification. And now we're going to help you imagine what a post-victimized identity looks like. Because you must remember that your imagination has this incredible power to be able to inform your brain, alter your neurochemistry and your neural wiring, help your body realign, and also help you regulate your organs as well as give you something to do that's other than being a victim. Now, one of the ways you can do this is relatively easy, is to imagine yourself helping other victims feel better. And you could help them feel better by writing music, playing music, visiting them in hospitals, doing magic tricks with them, talking to them, listening to them. You can imagine yourself using your victim identification to help them be able to sort through their experience and to authenticate what they've gone through. So that would be a very easy way now. So you imagine yourself helping other people. And what would you say, and what would you do, and what would you want done, and what would you want said, so that you can actually be of assistance to these people. And in the very act of imagining how you can assist others, you'll begin to realize that you're also talking about what it is you need, and what it is you needed, and what authenticated you, and what would assist you. And so you begin to take the wisdoms you've acquired from all of these classes, or all the people who have helped you, or all the ways you've moved forward, and you begin to put them together over here as these piles of things that will help others, but really you're consolidating the wisdom of your own recovery equipment. And you're also looking at the path you took, because nobody follows the same path, but this is the path you took. And so you're playing with your imagination, helping different people. So when you're reading through the book, Paths to Recovery After Abuse and Trauma, and you read about someone who's gone through trauma, to sit back and go, well, how would I help this person? What would I say? What would I do? What would I feel? What would I enact? What would I avoid? So that you kind of understand both your style, but also what tools you have acquired along the way. That's one very great way to handle imagination. The next thing you want to do is you want to imagine what it would be like if you had never gone through what you went through. This is not fun, not pleasant, not always what I'd recommend doing, but when it's the right type of imagination exercise at the right time, it's really helpful, because you begin to conceive of a you that lives life forward, that would do a series of different things that if you hadn't gone through what you did, you would be in the midst of. What would your life look like? What would you have forged? Who would you have met? What would you have done? What would you have enacted? All of these things being incredibly important and valuable to you, so that you have this sense of, oh, that's the me without that. The next imagining exercise to do is to imagine what it would be like to be doing all of that, to be this optimal person, but to do it in the context of the actual events that you experienced. So you begin to go, well, that's the me I'd be without the trauma. If I want that me that exists without the trauma, but the trauma and abuse existed, how do I bring those realities into this new me that would have been functioning this way and being this way? How can I be that, but also know that there are realities? So you begin to connect, that's what I want to be, this is what happened, how do they coexist? Because to the degree that you've segregated them, for some people that's very helpful. It's perfect to segregate. This is the trauma and abuse, I'm living this life. I'm going to forget about that, not have that, I'm going to cut it off, don't want to hear about it, don't want to talk about it, don't want to think about it. Sometimes it catches up with their body, it catches up with their relationships, it catches up with them. And so they have to go back and go, okay, I have to face that this went on, and that this is causing my future life complications. So back here, there's that, okay, I did have this, but I've also created this life. So in your imagination, you create this life, and you also say, okay, but this, how do I fit this experience into that over there? How do I face this into that over there? What about what I have in this imagination is so much better, and how do I keep growing that even though I know this occurred? I mean, an example of this is women who have been molested, men that have been molested as kids. And so, how do they have satisfying, intimate, romantic sexual relationships in the future? So, they have to develop, well, who am I sexually in the context of a safe, loving, romantic relationship? Who am I in that place? They have to create the imagining about that, but they know that they've gone through this horrible connection that has soiled the beauty of their sexuality in lots of ways. So this is reality, but that's the reality they want as well. And sometimes they segregate it really radically. So this is a different life than that. Sometimes they just endure, but they don't really have satisfying life. And sometimes over here, they're able to say, that was a poison, but look at what I can create regardless. So they feel victorious because that didn't ruin this process that you can do, is to use your imagination to create divides. This was my abuse and trauma. This was my recovery process. This is my era of thriving. A lot of individuals who survived Nazi Germany talk about living in the camps and having identity as someone who endured and survived that, the escape process, and then the transition of just getting their life back together, including their health, discovering who had been murdered and who hadn't, and then landing in the very bottoms of, well, I've got to even figure out how to pay for food, get clothing, find a basic job, find a basic place to live, much less having all the other areas of thriving. But they're moving now into the survivor mode, and how did they survive the recovery? Because they just have such basic lifestyle. Immigrants, they've come from horrible situations, they come to a new land, and they land flat on their face to just having to have the basics, to worry about the very basics of their capacity to survive. Now they're no longer being abused and traumatized, but they're over here just trying to figure out, how do I survive this new life? And one of the things that helps them is that they believe that they lived here, but their promised land is over here. This country going over there is going to give them a much better life. And they keep the imagination of that much better life always as their goal. And so then they break down, the process is this. They break down survival into, I have to do this now. I'm going to learn how to do that so I can get to this next level. I'm going to learn how to do this to get to the next level. Meanwhile, I'm going to have to do all these ways. Let me just give an example. So an individual comes to the United States and basically doesn't have any money and learns the system of how to get money out of different churches or different societies that are very helpful to giving handouts. So they learn how to live on the street. They learn how to get food from trash cans or whatever, but they're surviving. And they're focused on surviving. They're out of the trauma of war-torn countries or dictators that want to kill themselves and their families, and they're over here saying, I've just got to figure out how the basics of surviving. Eating, shelter, just keep myself alive. Now, meanwhile, these individuals are very resourceful because they were able to escape. They had some sort of capacity to really function at a high level over here. They have to bring that capacity to function, but at the very lowest level. So maybe this person gets a job washing dishes and washes, is conscientious, shows up, and at the same time also goes to school to learn the language. So now they're improving their language, but they're washing the dishes. They now can get themselves into some sort of shelter. They're eating ordinary food. Their health is improving. They're actually having to sleep, and they're educating themselves. They get the education. They up their process. Now, this sounds really dismal, but that's kind of the idea, is that once you have the goal that you want to thrive in this new land, now you have to figure out, what are the steps I have to do? What's the plan I have to put in place to get through these various levels of just surviving and keep progressing over here while I'm surviving? Surviving skills, progressing skills, surviving skills, progressing skills, so that you can create what you imagine in this new land. So what I want you to do is to imagine what that new land is, to keep that goal after you've imagined it firmly in mind. This new land has what? What's that new land like? What's my new life like? So that it's without regard to the trauma and abuse. It's very much in regard to, how do I create in this new land what it is I want? And therefore, how leads you to the question of, what are the resources? What are the steps? What's my plan? What are the increments of surviving and moving ahead, striving and moving ahead? Who do I have to be in order to keep this process going until I can envision myself actually living in a home with a family, getting them educated, eating good food, having a good paid salary, and being stable. And many immigrants, many war-torn countries that have led people to come to other countries have been able to go from the bottom to a really good space. Many of them have. And as a consequence, they're really the hardy, gritty parts of the society that they move into once they're able to move themselves into that strength. That's what you need to do with your abuse and trauma, is to envision this new land, what it will take to create that, and focus on the efforts of the plans and the steps and the education to get there. And now you're no longer living in abuse and trauma victimized consciousness. You're no longer even really living in the recovery zone. You're now living in the process of how do I create this space of thriving, and knowing that it's right at the edge of just keeping yourself surviving in this new context. Okay, so write about that process. Hold those types of imaginations in mind. Do the exercises, and I will see you in the next course. Keep pressing forward, okay? That new land, your land, is well worth fighting for. Talk to you later. Bye.